Hey everyone, it's Dr. Z. I wasn't sure I was ever going to release this video. Number one, because my mom watches these videos, and in it, I, Zubin, a Stanford-trained physician, the pride and joy of my family, talk about doing 3 of the most powerful psychedelic medicines known to mankind in a row over 3 days. And this video is me integrating that experience in real time with my guide, Mira Funk. So it's pretty extra. I'm not sure, I was talking with her about this, I'm not sure this has ever really been done on YouTube. And if it has, I don't know if it's been done like this. So in this video, I talk about my experience with 5-MeO-DMT, vaporized, as well as rectally administered. There's butt stuff in the video. A pharmacologic analog of ayahuasca on day 2, nn-dmt plus Harmaline and MAO-I inhibitor. This is serious, you guys, serious medicines. And the 3rd day is Salvia Divinorum, which pretty much defies description, but we'll talk about it. No, so why did I even do this? I did this because I felt called. And I often listen when the universe is telling me these things, and the universe sent me an email from my guide, Mira Funk. She is a remarkable human, and you'll see her in this video. She would describe herself as a queer, non-binary psychotherapist. She's a licensed clinical social worker and psychedelic guide and non-dual integration expert. Now, what does all that mean? Watch the video. Her website is UnJourneying.com. Now, she emailed me and said, I watch your stuff and I've been using psychedelics in a different way to unjourney, to instead of going out looking for experience in a light show and unity consciousness and mystical experiences, what if they could show us this moment as everything? Unjourney us right back to where we never left, this eternal now. And I was so intrigued, having worked on this stuff for years and years and going, I've seen the light shows. I'm interested in this. What can help pull the clouds of obscuration away from this moment? And boy, did that actually become clear. Now, Mira herself would tell you, and she will tell you in the disclaimer that I expect you to read in the show notes to this, that also has links to all her stuff, and also the other videos that we did prior to this that we haven't maybe released yet, but you can click through and access them now. We will release them publicly, but I thought I'd release the 3rd video first, which is this video. The first video is a 4.5-hour experience with Mira about talking about all these medicines that details her own story and all the caveats and safety issues. So those are mentioned in some of the show notes, like you really should consult a medical professional who can talk about interactions between your medications and your conditions, especially inflammatory conditions like multiple sclerosis, et cetera, and these medicines. Okay, we talk about the details of these medicines. One particular misunderstanding that can happen is Salvia Divinorum affects a type of opioid receptor that is distinct from the type of receptors that things like fentanyl and typical opioids interact with. So it doesn't have the same addictive stigma and opioid stigma that opioids do. So just to know that, that's one piece that Mira wanted to make sure you guys understood. And understand that none of this is medical advice, that this is information, and you need to talk to your own healthcare provider, your own psychedelic guide. My own recommendation is if this stuff calls to you, find a very good guide. Mira is one of them, and her links will be in here. She's based in Oregon. And also to address and understand what the legality in your country, state, municipality is around this stuff, okay? All that said, when you watch this video, really feel into what's being transmitted. The words are one thing, but this is coming from a place where these medicines had just recently opened. And I think if you're sensitive to this, you'll feel this transmission. And then you can go back and watch the other videos, a meditation that she does, and then the 4-hour full Cheech deep dive. All right, without further ado, I bring you my integration session of all the things with Mira Funk. Mira Funk, it's so good to be together again.
Yeah, it is. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming
to be here. Yeah.
This is really exciting. A little bit scary for me because I'm talking about things that had been societally taboo for a long time.
Yes.
and are now coming back into the consciousness more in the mainstream way. And we're talking about psychedelics and awakening or non-duality, spirituality, these aspects that, people talk about psychedelics and we've done the shows, which we'll link to, where we go into detail on a lot of the stuff. You took us through some meditations in another video. But this is something where now I've actually walked the walk with you. And so we went through your process together. And I was, it's hard. It's so interesting because all my conditioning as a doctor and a professional and somebody who's always feared authority, but also hated authority at the same time, feels like, should I be talking about this stuff publicly?
Yeah.
And the thing is, yes, because it's important. It was such a beautiful experience, a difficult, challenging experience. And I felt really held and guided and supported. And I felt like we were a bit on the leading edge of some things that I think will be very helpful for a certain number of people. Not everybody. This is not for everybody. And, we'll put all the usual disclaimers that, talk to your doctor, talk to a licensed guide, make sure to be evaluated in all the mental illness. We talked about safety at length before. That said, we've been through all that with me. All systems go.
Yeah.
So we did a 2-day experience retreat that you guided, and you yourself prepared all the medications, all the medicines, and meticulously, as you do, safety, safety, safety. We went through an intake, medical checklist, all of that, and then we did it. And what we ended up doing was the journey you talked about in our other conversation, which is a 5 MEO-DMT experience the first day. And the second day was the ayahuasca analog.
That's what I like to call it.
Yeah, the ayahuasca analog orally.
Yes.
And then the next thing we did, the final thing we did was the Salvia Divinorum.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. And it was something.
Yeah. And since we touched on the rectal route,
yes,
should mention.
Oh yeah. So we didn't mention route of the 5 MEO-DMT.
Yeah. So we did that in 2 ways.
That's right. 2 ways. Yeah. Vaped in a graduated concentration.
Stepwise, yeah.
And then the rectal administered 5 MEO. And we talked about this in the previous show. It's shocking when people hear, oh, rectal, what do you mean? And yet in medicine, we give suppositories all the time. We give enemas. There's plenty of per rectum medications we give. And there's a very specific reason why you do this. And we're going to talk about it. And of course, there's the usual stigma and hesitancy and what? And who's giving that to you? And no, you're not giving it to me. I'm giving it to me.
Right. I leave the room. I have a kid.
That's right. Yeah. And so we can talk about it. But okay, so I think we should just jump in and we'll see what goes where.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started that morning and you started me with some intention setting and some yoga, breath work that really centered, because there's nervousness. 5 MEO-DMT has a reputation for being challenging. It can be really, it can launch you into hyperspace. There's this eco-death can happen, these things that you read about, especially when we talked about smoking it or the toad extract, which is hard to dose.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
But the way you did it is you had it meticulously crafted into different vape pens.
Right.
With and we talked all about the base and everything. So I was very comfortable that you were going to take me through a slow, graduated approach. So I sat on a mattress. I had a pillow behind me, meditation cushion, and you walked me through how to use the vape pen and what the protocol is. It's inhale for a certain amount, hold it for how you're counting, exhale for a certain amount, and then either sit if you think that's comfortable or lie back. And so for me, the first dose, you didn't really taste anything. You inhale. And then as I exhaled,
I'm getting goosebumps already.
I can feel it now. The entire heart opened instantly within seconds. And I started crying and I started sort of self-soothing and just feeling this immense amount of love and emotion just coursing through with complete mental clarity.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful, and it lasted only, what would you say?
It was about 7 minutes, I think, approximately.
7 minutes.
Yeah.
But it felt like I'd gone to like 10 years of therapy.
Yeah.
Like it was that opening. And I think I told you, I said, if we don't do anything else in these couple days, this will have been absolutely worth it.
Yeah. It's so interesting you said that, because when I first received the medicine with this protocol, with a guide, I had the exact same experience. He gave me the first very lightest dose. It might have even been lighter. It might have been like we did the 1 to 8. There might have been a 1 to 12 or something like that. And I remember I told him the same thing. I said, that was so powerful. I feel like, if that was it, this would have been worth everything.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was so much more.
There's so much more.
Yeah.
But they were so filled with gratitude and the trust that I'd already had. But we'd known each other only a little bit, but there was trust.
Yeah.
But the trust just blossomed because I was like, she knows what she's doing. Like this was as she mentioned, like the sort of earliest handshake of what this medicine is capable of.
Yeah.
And that really relaxed my nervous system too, which was important because there was a sense of like, oh, what am I doing?
Of course, yeah.
Do I really need to do this? All the mind is trying to talk me out of it. Yeah. So that was dose 1. Then you went to the next more concentrated dose. And this one was very different. So what I remember is I took the inhalation, and now I'm already a pro at this. I'm exhaling and I feel it hit. And I'm sitting on the meditation cushion upright, and I close my eyes, and there is just profound stillness. Those emotions that were moving before felt like they've passed through, and now there was just this still, empty presence. And then, this is hard for me to remember, and you might remember more, but I laid back actually. And I felt, again, this kind of, just kind of an interesting presence in the chest, and a little bit of a kind of interesting pattern behind the eyes. I closed my eyes, and that's what I remember from that dose. It was much more subtle. Yeah. And I don't know if you saw me do anything during that or.
Yeah, that one I remember. Yeah, it didn't seem to have as much of an outpouring of emotion in terms of the tears and so forth. But it seemed to be, doing some energetic work. You were definitely doing some spontaneous movements with your hands, which is a big part of your expression. And it's pretty common to see people do just spontaneous. Some people would ascribe this to kind of a Kundalini energy, or almost like spontaneous kriyas or yoga forms. But it almost looked as if you were swimming through the air, making these symmetrical motions with your hands and touching your chest, things like that.
I actually remember this now. Yeah, it was almost like these mudras that would spontaneously happen, and I don't do those in any practice, but it's spontaneous.
That's so interesting because as I was watching you, it has the look of an advanced practice. I was thinking, oh, Zubin must have done some kind of yogic training, but it's not. I've
never done it,
which is just really fascinating because then it makes you kind of speculative, like, oh, I wonder where yoga comes from.
Where does it come from? Where does it come from?
All these different forms,
because they're just spontaneous.
Yeah.
And they're felt to be. You're not even doing it consciously, right? It's just happening.
It feels completely natural and what needs to happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was so qualitatively different than the first dose. Like almost like, it's showing me something totally different that's here. So that was, I think, the second. Then the third, and you may have to help me remember, but I think this one was a challenging one, yeah?
Yeah, I think, and sometimes, with this medicine in a stepwise way, there's different ways to do it in terms of how many doses you give. Some practitioners working in this modality just do like 3 doses. So it's what we call the 1 to 8 pen, the 1 to 4, and the 1 to 2. I do it a little, I do serve those same pens, but I split up the titration a little finer with the length of the inhale. So we were doing a 4-second inhale, a 6-second inhale, 4 and 6 kind of going up. And some of the doses didn't have as much of an effect, which was interesting. And that happens sometimes. It's sort of a mystery.
That's right.
To me. but what I remember, the next moment that felt like a kind of cusp point or kind of salient moment is when we started to get in closer to the full release.
Yes.
And I remember
this. I remember.
Yeah, you turned to me. Do you remember this? And you said,
"Yes, I'm lost.
I'm lost."
Yeah,
yeah.
So this is what that was like. Now I remember that dose. That was the dose. As I exhaled, it hit much quicker. So it was before. I mean, I was already in the process of lying down as I was exhaling, and I felt that rush of that experience. Closed my eyes and laid back on the pillow, and now it was like all this energy in the body and the chest was trying to explode into dissolution. It felt like I was trying to fall apart.
Yeah.
And there was discomfort, some mild nausea, a little bit of like almost existential discomfort. And it felt, there was almost a sense of despair because I think the body started moving naturally, and I was like making vocalizations, and it just felt energetically like I was on the precipice of something that wasn't okay. That wasn't, I shouldn't go. Yeah. And that's when I came out of it, I looked at you, and you're sitting right here the whole time, and you don't make eye contact unless it feels like you're going to, because otherwise I guess it can feel invasive, but you know exactly when to do it.
Or if I feel an invitation from you.
So I looked at you and you looked at me, and I said, I'm lost. And this is what it felt like. Oh, I'm sorry, because in this dose, I saw my wife and my kids.
That's right.
There was this infinite longing and love, like such a painful love, because I knew that if I loved that much, like if I ever lost them, I would die. Like it felt like that. It was such this desperate love for my children and my wife, and I think I was mouthing spontaneously. You may not have seen this, but I was like, "I love you, I love you."
I did see that.
Yeah. And it felt now from here, it feels like there was this energetic tether tying me to this life, and I did not want to let it go, because it felt like it was a one-way trip.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when I turned to you and I said, "I'm lost. I don't know what I want.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm here." I think that was that conflict between, shouldn't that be enough? Here they are, everything I need. What am I doing? And I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Because it feels like that's going away. Like this is falling apart. And what did you tell me?
Yeah. So what I told you is I first of all just wanted to make space for your feelings, right? I mean, this is me as a therapist, right? So here you're telling me I'm lost. I'm saying, I hear you, and that sounds hard, and that's okay that you're feeling that, right? Just to kind of set you at ease. And then I wanted to normalize for you that experience. And so I shared a bit of, with your permission, I didn't want to just beat you over the head with what I was seeing, but I was asking you, would it be helpful if I shared where I see you on the map?
Yeah.
And you said yes. So I went ahead and shared. And of course, when I talk about the map of these experiences, the map is never the territory, but it helps. It helps sort of position where we are. And yeah, when people are feeling lost, just to know that many others have gone on this map and ended up at kind of common points. And so you kind of know, oh, okay, I'm not alone here. And what I said was, that basically what I see many times is that when folks get close to this full release experience, which isn't necessarily a singular experience, it can be many things, but there's something that happens where everything just goes and just becomes energy, or maybe it just disappears, or in some ways it feels like a kind of death, a simulation of death. And you can, when you do it in a stepwise way, you can feel that you're getting close to that. And so some of my clients have described this as, it's like you're getting close to a black hole, and almost like you're circling it, or you're on the edge of a cliff. I think you said something like that. Yeah. And you're about to fall off. And of course, everything in your nervous system is starting to light up and say, what am I doing? This doesn't make any sense. This is dangerous. It's terrifying. And so there can be some, yes, just some terror or horror that comes up. And sometimes it feels like you're approaching death, but in some ways it feels even worse, like almost like oblivion, like total obliteration.
Worse than death. Yeah.
Yeah.
And death is still a concept I can, I'm dead in some kind of place.
And then, the whole one-way ticket thing, and people, and I think you were processing this too, like sometimes at that moment, literally start to fear that they will actually biologically die.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, what if my heart stops? What if my breathing stops? What if I vomit and aspirate? What if? So the catastrophizing mind starts kicking into high gear. I've seen this happen many times.
Yeah.
And so, and the beautiful thing is that when someone's in that state, as you were, the first thing I want to do is just hold space for the feelings and just like process and get you anything you need. And maybe that's physical touch, like holding your hand, or maybe that's just going outside in the sun and grounding.
You offered those, yeah.
Yeah. And the wonderful thing about this approach is you don't have to jump off the cliff, right? And I offered that to you.
You told me that.
I was like, we can stop. And I've actually had many clients who get to that point and the fear response is strong enough that they know my nervous system is not quite ready for this yet. And so what they do is they go off and do it on integration on their own, but also with me in different, online or in-person sessions. And then maybe, a month, 2 months, 6 months, whenever they do feel ready and they feel called, then they come back and then we go to the next dose.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah.
And you know what? It gave me, there were two things that I felt at that time. First of all, okay, I'm not alone. Like you said, this is validating.
Yeah.
I'm not some edge, shameful case that can't let go.
Right, exactly.
That's what it felt like. I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. And the second thing was, you mentioned that you don't have to do this. And in a sense, for me, that was great because it gave me this sense of safety. Like, I'm not forced to do anything, which I knew already. But when you said, and many of my clients will stop here, I said, okay, I get why now. It's validating to feel that this terror is scary. It is okay that you would be scared and that you'd see your life flash before your eyes. And for me, the feeling of death actually arises in the abdomen. It's like when I hear the phrase pain of death, it's funny. I often feel this discomfort in my abdomen. So for me, it's like there's some clenching there that holds onto this. And so yes, so you told me that. And then I remember I said, okay, I have to decide what I want to do. And I think I said, this is what I signed up for. This is what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Now, but I said, I can't do this. I said, I can't do this. I can't let go in this way. So
and that's when I think I told you, you don't have to worry about that because actually the medicine will do it for you.
That's right. That's right.
That's what's so beautiful about 5-MeO.
And that was,
it's not some heroic moment where you're like,
I will do this.
I'm going to let go. Because that's what people assume, they're going to have some dilemma where it's like, as the hero of this story, I'm going to make this heroic moment of letting go. But it's not like that because you can't do it. It's something that happens. And the medicine is the catalyst.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I was like, okay, the medicine's going to do it. I have to surrender. I don't know how to do that. So I asked you, I was like, do you mind if I pray?
Yeah, that's right. That was really interesting.
And it's interesting because I don't pray. I'm not a theist. So, I think everything is God in some sense, but I couldn't do it myself and I had to devote and surrender to something bigger than what this was. And so I just got on my knees and put this, and I wasn't actually praying words. It was intent. It was like, please, please help, 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 help. Yeah. And then I think I kind of turned to you, kind of resigned, and I'm like, all right, let's go. And the next dilution up.
Yeah. And something I want to say just briefly in terms of just different approaches to this medicine is some guys, as I mentioned, do just this in maybe just 3 doses.
Right.
Boom, boom,
more
boom.
Steep, yeah.
More steep curve. And then there are some other guys who just do 1 mega dose.
Right.
Just blast it. And there are advantages and disadvantages to these different approaches. As I see it, the steeper that curve is going up, the riskier it is because you might shock somebody's nervous system, especially if someone's had a lot of trauma.
For sure.
Perhaps like the one advantage to it is that sometimes it does, when you give somebody that much escape velocity from the get-go, you experience all that fear, but then it's sort of like it's already too late because you just have so much velocity that you go through the fear and then you have the full release.
Yeah.
So when you do it in this stepwise way, you feel the fear, and then before you get all the way to that full release, and then you kind of have to process it and work up the courage to do it again. Which is harder. It's harder.
I was almost regretting it a bit because I was like, this is giving me every chance to bail on this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm giving you permission. You don't have to do it.
But I needed to do it that way because I was afraid from people I've talked to who've done full release up front, and some of them were just so frightened by the experience, and they blacked out, or they just, they said, oh, it was just, I'd never want to do that again. And that was not the flavor I got with this medicine going up like this.
Yeah.
It was like, it was introduced, it was letting me feel, it was opening me, it was putting me in stillness, and then it was saying, okay, next. It was almost encouraging, and then with the guide saying the same thing, like, and you don't have to go further.
Yeah.
That was what I needed.
Yeah.
And then I could surrender by praying in a way. There was a giving up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm biased because this is how I do it, but I'm pretty convinced, just because I've seen it served in so many different ways, that this is, at least right now, the technology we have, the most trauma-informed way to do it.
I was going to say that also, and you mentioned trauma because I have some trauma, right? And that first dose just, and the second dose just is feeling into the body, and it's holding that trauma and self-soothing. And there was some of that during this dose, this near-death dose, where I was self-soothing a little. Yeah. So the next dose then was a more concentrated dose, but yeah.
Yeah, that was the 6 seconds. So we're in the 1 to 2 pen for those of you who want to look this up, these different concentrations. But so that was we did a 4 second and a 6 second. And I remember telling you, I think maybe this is going to be the one that gets you there because he seems like you're close, but I never know for sure. And it turns out it wasn't. It wasn't quite. Right. And you knew that. Yeah, I remember you said as soon as it hit, I knew not quite.
It wasn't enough velocity. Yeah, because I could feel the onrush, and I was like, "Oh, this is not it." But I had enough with that one. It was like I could do a little more work.
There was so much work here.
There was a lot of. Do you remember what was happening?
Oh yeah, just so much like vocalization.
That's right.
And you were making all sorts of facial expressions. Yeah. I could see. And you were rapidly processing all these emotions. I could see animalistic, like,
there was growling.
Like, growling, and then sometimes the growling would release and you'd have this kind of blissful face.
Thing, yeah.
And you were, moving your arms.
And all of this, I was aware the entire time. I knew this was happening, and I wasn't doing it. Like, it was just this natural expression of this energy.
Yeah.
It felt like this just so much energy coming through.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this kind of growling that happened. I was like, where's this coming from? Yeah, very primal. Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you were so aware of your body. And I think even, we'll get to the next dose in a second, but it sounds like you had a lot of like bodily awareness all the way through.
This was what was surprising to me for the whole journey, all the days, is the level of awareness that I had throughout. And I think that's a function of the years of meditation and the work that I've done and so on. And because I was a little surprised because the way some have described it is that, you don't know where you are. And,
yeah. So that was because, when I first received it, which was with this just blast off, kind of bungee jump. I felt like I completely left the planet. I was doing all sorts of things with my body and vocalizing, and I was not aware of any of that. And that's, I would say, and I don't know. Is it because of spiritual preparation? Is it just because of
dose?
Yeah, dose. Differences in physiology, neurology. Who knows? But some people do have this experience where they, it's almost like they're having a conscious experience, but they have no idea what their body is doing whatsoever. There's a complete disconnect there temporarily. But then other people like you somehow seem to, even in these deep states, retain a certain awareness. So it's very interesting.
It was very surprising because it was throughout all the different journeys, and except for one, which we'll talk about. But yeah, so right. So this point there was a lot of this, and then I was like, that wasn't it.
And then we brought out the
big guns.
So there's in this protocol there's the 1 to 8, 1 to 4, 1 to 2, and then there's the 1 to 1, which is usually the most concentrated, and I almost never use it. Actually, you're the first person I've ever used it on. And I will say, in fairness to you, I've I used to just stick with the 1 to 2, and I would just have people inhale higher and higher, like 8 seconds, 10 seconds, which is actually where it maxes out because the battery just starts blinking at that point. But I found with some people that, the lung capacity, it was like, it felt more strenuous.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I'll start incorporating the 1-to-1 instead. And then it just so happened that you're the first person who went that high.
Because I'm very stubborn, according to my wife. Yeah. I'm like, no, it's going to take epic doses.
Yeah. And it was, so we did just 4 seconds on the 1-to-1, and it felt like it just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
In terms
so
of what you needed.
This is where things get really foggy and weird.
Yeah.
And beautiful. So I was exhaling, and as I was exhaling, I was like, oh, this is different. Like I knew, I was like, this is a velocity that, whoa, and the next thing I'm back on my back. And honestly, you're going to have to help me here, because there was just like this, just like everything was, I can't even say much about. There was so much energy. It felt like my heart was dissolving into infinity. Mm-hmm. And at some point, this is where my awareness was. I remember being aware of me saying, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And it was this ecstatic, like I couldn't, it was just, and growling and this and this and this. And just, then there was a sense, this is what I remember, and I don't know if this is accurate. I had this sense of despair, like, and then I opened my eyes just spontaneously, and I looked around, and it was just this crazy, I don't know what, energy everywhere. And I looked at my hands, and I put my hands like this and clasped them just spontaneously, and they looked like I could see like the bones through the hands, like it was just transparent.
X-ray vision.
X-ray vision. It was like X-ray vision, and I just pulled them apart slowly, and as the portal of vision opened between the hands, I have no idea what happened, but suddenly it was this massive just clarity, like, and laughter started happening, and just joy, and it was like, oh, it's so clear, it's so simple. It was always just this, all this journeying. And I like, poor Zubin has been on such a journey. I was holding myself. I practically jumped off the mattress and jumped onto the couch.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and for a moment, I my safety hat came on. I was like, okay,
what's up?
I want to make sure, because as soon as people are really deep in the state, they can be spontaneously moving, and you really have to watch to make sure
keep them safe.
Bump anything. But you were actually coming down at that point enough that you were, aware of.
What was crazy is there was no coming down, is how it felt. It felt like there was all this insanity and the fingers and the bones, and then just clarity. And there was energy coming out, and then I was just like laughing, went up. I remember this clearly. Go up to the couch, sat there, looked around, looked at you. I'm laughing. I'm like,
yeah, I remember.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. Like, you're expecting this experience.
Yeah.
And who knows what happened, whether there was cessation of all experience, whether I went into infinity and came back and there's no memory of it. It doesn't matter. I came back from wherever this was completely clear of what this is. It is just exactly this. Can't say a word about it. It's perfect. It's hilarious, because we think it's this big deal and it's this story, and that we've been on this journey to find it, and this medicine will help us. And then when you see it, it's just, the cosmic joke is right there. And it was blissfully perfect. And I knew, what was funny is, because we were like, oh, was that the release? Like, I think I knew you were trying to assess. Yeah. And very quickly, what did you say to me?
Well, I think I said, like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I usually, try to diagnose, or for myself, like, has the person, had that release, experience? And usually I can tell even before I talk to them, because something energetic has really shifted in a big way. And just by watching you, I mean, there was just so much energy happening. And you were laughing, you were smiling, you were doing a little of the, which is, I think, some of the resistance until things just kind of broke. open. And then you were also doing these huge kind of rolls with your back, with your legs, where you're lifting your legs up.
Wow, yeah.
And it was very almost like a baby.
Yeah.
Just rolling your legs back. And yeah, seeing you, I had this strong sense of, I mean, I didn't know for sure until I talked to the person. And then usually it's like, okay. But I thought to myself, yeah, I think we got it. But then usually what people say that makes me know that, yes, they've had the full release is there's this very strong sense that whatever that experience was, there was nothing like higher that you could have sort of experienced.
That's right.
And that's why people often make the comparison to an orgasm.
Yeah.
With it's almost like a spiritual orgasm because, yeah, there is that feeling of there's some kind of climactic energetic event has like happened, and you just know like, oh, that I can't go higher than that. That's just where
exactly
that's the ceiling that you hit.
Stop stroking.
Yeah,
yeah. Exactly.
And it's kind of interesting too because in some cases it's a much more literal thing because there are cases where people have this eruption of sexual energy that happens.
Ah, interesting.
And yeah, I've had actually at least one client who has reported to me like experiencing an orgasm like on the medicine.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that happens every once in a while.
It did have that orgasmic sense of energy, like almost like unbearably ecstatic.
Yeah.
And then it's exactly like you said, when I sat up on the couch and I looked at you and I looked around and I was laughing, there was such an absolute certainty that there was nothing else to do with that mechanism of medicine.
Yeah.
It was like, yep.
You were done.
Done. Yeah. Like if you would have told me, actually, I think if you went a little more on that, you might go deeper. Nope.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even fear. It was just like, nope, don't need to.
And that's what I find is I love this stepwise way because I try to dial in just the minimum amount of medicine you need to get that full release. And what I find is if you go above that, what happens is people just have what they call a whiteout, where you essentially just lose consciousness and you wake up and then it's very disjointed. I've had it happen to me a few times. And I think that there's still a lot that's happening unconsciously. And I do feel like in the integration, you have a feeling of something has shifted. Yeah. But I do feel like it leaves your nervous system with a sense of like unfinished business. And I found that when I've had whiteouts, I just tend to have, integration just feels bumpier. Like I have more stuff come up in my sleep or I have more like reactivations. But with this process where the person remains continuously conscious, except for maybe these momentary flashes of
what was that?
It seems like the integration is much smoother. I have much fewer people report just like nighttime events, which are fine. It just can disrupt your sleep, or maybe you just have these reactivations which just can be blissful, can also be intrusive sometimes. If you're just at work and all of a sudden you feel like you're back in the medicine.
And I can say I'll cut to a little spoiler, but that night I didn't sleep that well, but I haven't been sleeping well. And I don't know that I had reactivation, but I certainly didn't have anything too turbulent in terms of what I felt integration was, because the event itself just felt so perfect. It felt like, and I think I was saying, poor Zubin.
Yeah, so much compassion for your inner child.
For this child that was like never, like always seeking for the answer. Like, what is the meaning of this? Like, what is this? Like, why am I here? And it's like, it's this. There's nothing to do. It's always been this. And all this tool is doing is showing you what you always and already have really deeply known. And it was such a relief. And at that point, I realized everything else we do now is just going to be frosting on the cake. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. I was like, this is it. And then we kind of broke for a break. And hydrated, because you're nothing by mouth after the morning. Because there can be the risk of
that's how I do it. I mean, different guides have different protocols around this, but I tend to be very strict around the fasting, and that's for very specific reason, because there can be purging, and I'm right there. I have a bucket I can direct it, but it just introduces more risk, and not to mention more messiness,
discomfort.
Discomfort. So if we so usually I have people fast for 6 hours from food before we serve, and 1 hour from liquids, and then no liquids during the experience. And I haven't had any issues.
Yeah, and I didn't either, except I did feel the nausea, but it was an energetic feeling in the abdomen.
And wasn't the nausea with the rectal?
More so.
Okay, but you did have some.
I did have some.
Oh, you did have
I did
some.
have,
Okay.
it was very slight, and I knew, oh, this isn't bad. Yeah, so there you go. So there was that. Now you've prefaced the rectal. So after the break and some laying down and nap and that kind of thing, really kind of recharging the nervous system, we went on to this rectal administration of 5-MeO. And we've talked about it in the previous video, but the basic, you walk me through it, and it's basically you self-administer it via a small syringe with some lube, and you walk me through it perfectly. You left the room. I did it.
And the syringe doesn't have a needle, just to be clear. I've had some people ask me about that. It's a blunt tip plastic syringe. Yeah.
Just put a lot of lube on it. Yeah. That's my advice. And it's like, doing an enema or a suppository in that way. So I did that. I called you back in, laid down. And I was excited about this one because you'd mentioned it can actually go deep into the body, into these lower root kind of energies. And that's where I know I have this kind of hurt. And so I was excited. And when I laid down very quickly, my experience, and I think it's different than some, but hard to say, I started feeling this warmth and discomfort come up from the lower abdomen, like almost like a crampy pain. And the mind was saying, oh, maybe there's something in the formulation that's irritating, but it rose energetically into the abdomen, and it started feeling like really uncomfortable. Like, again, that pain of death in the abdomen. I was feeling this root kind of danger, like this is what it feels like to die in a way, like it's so uncomfortable. And in that, and then that energy spread through the body. And I don't remember what I was doing, but I feel like I was really just almost regressing into a childlike state.
Absolutely.
Do you remember some of that?
Yeah, I do. And we talked about how it seemed like you were perhaps re-experiencing a childhood trauma involving medical trauma and a lot of anxiety about your own safety, fundamentally. And I remember, it looked like you were really going through it, and you were very vulnerable, and you were very regressed. And this is something that happens fairly commonly, I find, on just the rectal, which is interesting. I don't find there's as much regression to childhood with the vaping, which is interesting. But with the rectal, and it's happened to me. I experienced that as well. It's just something people, get very, very vulnerable, and you have this sort of window where you feel like a child again, and then it gives you this incredible opportunity to do some reparenting work.
That's right.
With me as the guide, serving as a kind of symbolic parent, but ultimately supporting you to kind of reparent yourself with your, intrapsychically, with your different part.
That's right.
Right, to like self-soothe. And so there was, you remember the moment you called for like physical touch.
Yeah.
And that's something that's on offer with many guides, and people do that differently and have different, sort of boundaries around it. For me, if people feel like it's supportive, they can ask me for supportive touch, and that's usually I hold someone's hand, or it can be a hand on the shoulder, that sort of thing. And so I held your hand, I put your hand on your shoulder, and you actually started to suck your thumb during that process. And so for me, it was obvious that there was a childhood regression happening. And that's, again, not uncommon. I've seen people suck their thumb. I've seen people kind of suck on their arm. There's sort of this like oral infantile
self-soothing pacifier. Yeah.
That's happening.
I remember this. Yeah. And I actually remember, because I had this intention, and I've done some of this work in meditation and so on. I was self-soothing my inner child, saying, I love you. It's okay. You're safe. And holding and it was really down low. And that's why I think that rectal administration, it was so powerful, like in a way that I'd never experienced. It was so direct at the root of what we can't access otherwise without all this projection and obscuration. And so I could feel this child who was terrified, who couldn't speak, was having these pains and feeling unsafe, and going in and just saying, I'm here. I know it hurts. And I remember this. I said, I'm sorry. Yeah. Because I felt like that's what my parents wanted to say or something when I was suffering, and I couldn't understand those words when you're a little baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like that. And then I think this was where this started to happen. I started to feel too, like, this is what, like, this kind of suffering, I think this was this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I started to realize my father, when he passed in April, had end stage COPD, and I've done a video about this, and, he died in the hospital, and my mother and I couldn't be with him when he died. It happened very fast, but I was there. I was actually on the phone with my mom, and she said, oh, he's now, on comfort care and he doesn't have long. And so I immediately sat down and tried to go with my heart and the space to where he was. And I felt the moment of his passing, but I wasn't there. So I was able to feel like this must be what it was like to feel alone and afraid in a hospital.
Yeah. Now I remember you shared this. Yeah.
And so I thought about my dad. And at that point, it just, the spontaneous, I just was like, poor daddy,
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I hadn't really felt that ability, because we never said, I love you, I love you. That wasn't our thing.
Yeah.
But in this moment, I said, Daddy, I love you. Daddy, I love you. I love you, Daddy. And in a way, I wasn't self-parenting anymore. I was parenting my parent.
Yeah.
And holding him and telling him I loved him because I did, and I do, and he's still here. And that was I'm so grateful for that, because it happened. That actually happened.
Yeah.
And that's the rectal 5-MeO-DMT experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And that's why I'm so grateful that, I don't know who does this but you.
There are a few other folks out there.
Yeah.
It's not very common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for people who have done trauma work and they feel like this is something that calls to them, reaching out to you or an equivalent provider would be so powerful. And I can speak to this. And it's a kind of vulnerability, because, putting things in your butt is a vulnerable thing.
It is. Yeah.
And it just feels like something that you've just allowed something to happen that is not, normally you would defend against.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of that kind of comes together with the opening that had happened previously to just make this. I'm so grateful for the experience. And even talking about it now allows this is integration. It allows it to be really, really felt again. And it reintegrates and it's reappreciated.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was really beautiful. And this, I feel like you mentioned this just in summary before, but this is the first time hearing kind of the whole story. And wow,
I just couldn't talk.
Yeah,
of
course.
Talk. Yeah.
And you don't need to.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels like it brought up so much. Yeah, and that's almost two-way relationship of you being the child, but then you being the parent of your parent.
Yeah.
And and accessing,
metaphorically.
So much compassion for yourself, your inner child, and then compassion for your dad and his own state of suffering, right? Yeah.
So again, I'm just so grateful to you for that, because I never would have been exposed to that possibility, and it felt like work that it had to be done, because I had so much equanimity around my father's passing, really, and it was beautiful, and it was true, authentic equanimity, because I knew it was everything was perfect in that way, but there's still that, kid who's lost his daddy, and I hadn't allowed, really, I didn't know where to go for that. And there it was, through my own memory of this traumatic suffering. So it's just such a beautiful, difficult, challenging, but instantly I knew, so much gratitude. Yeah.
It is so powerful, and it should be approached carefully, just like any other medicine. And I should mention too that I also offer this in a kind of stepwise titrated way, right? So in this case, we just did one session, but that was at the lowest dose.
Oh, that was the lowest dose.
That's the lowest dose I usually start people off with 15 milligrams. Now, as I think I said last time we spoke about this, if someone, really wanted to do the rectal and felt ready and had, but had a much more extensive, let's say, trauma history, or had been, let's say, diagnosed with PTSD in the past and had been working on that with a therapist, I might actually start lower, and especially if I was seeing with the vaping that there was a high level of reactivity.
Yeah.
Like maybe we would start with as little as, 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams just to kind of see. But yeah, I felt like I trusted your capacity to handle that. That's like my usual standard starting dose, the 15 milligrams. It's usually enough to stir up a lot, but it's usually, for most folks, it doesn't feel like overwhelming or just like unbearable.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, for me, the experience was it was right on the cusp of what I felt I could bear. So it was actually just right.
Good.
And I'm glad it was one dose and I got through that. It was be fine, it was multiple, but there was something about that that was just perfection in that dose. It just showed up the way it needed to. Yeah.
And it's just so interesting in this work, just seeing how, like we can't ever really say how the medicine and whatever dose and whatever route of administration is going to affect somebody. And I try to always be careful about how I describe these things, because sometimes I'll use the you pronoun. I'll say, oh, you'll feel this, you'll feel that. And I have to say, no, I did, or I've seen other clients experience it in this way, but I can't speak to what somebody's experience will be. Because I've seen some clients, and this was kind of my experience, where I did have this childhood regression, but also it opened up pretty quickly into this deep sense of safety and bliss. And I've had some other clients as well. I have one I'm thinking of in particular who did 3 of these in a row and just experienced it as heaven, in his words. And he was looking up at the skylights in his home and just experiencing this utter kind of bliss out of just being. And so it can happen all sorts of ways, but I think I do think it has a really powerful capacity to touch into trauma very deep in the body that I've never found any other medicine or any other route does. And it's something, and it's interesting, whatever it's touching into, whether it's that lower vagus nerve or what, but you're right that there is something very receptive about it, that it can feel almost, I think, initially like invasive if you're feeling, if it's touching into trauma like this, oh my God, like something is inside of me. That
and a little nausea and everything.
But then as it's coming up, it's hitting, you right in those places that feel clenched and unsafe. And then allows you to do that deep work. And it's a longer experience too. It is too. It's not
45 minutes or so.
Usually I see like 30 to 60, somewhere in that range. And so it opens up this window to just do what I've seen, some of the deepest, most fast acting trauma work that I've ever seen in my career as a therapist. A therapist who's been trained in all these different modalities. I worked in the VA in a PTSD outpatient clinic with veterans, and we were doing some of these evidence-based protocols like prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and so forth. And to me, this just blows all that out of the water. I mean, we're talking about 30 to 60 minutes, years of therapy, but it's deeper than therapy, because it's something that you can't, it's pre-verbal.
It's energetic.
It's somatic.
It's somatic. It's in the body. It's pre-verbal. You're right, because you can talk and talk and talk, but to feel into that, feel the fear and the clenching and the somatic sensations of it, and then be in a state where you can hold it. Like there's another part of you that's bigger, that has capacity to hold it.
Right.
And I should say one thing. One thing I did for almost every dose of everything we did was I didn't mention this to you, I don't think. I started each inhalation or administration or whatever with this inner sense or intention of gratitude and love. Like I would say inside, I love you, just non-specifically, I love you. And that would sort of set a flavor for the trajectory. So it wasn't something scary. It was based in love. It was based in the work that you're going to do, and it can be tough work. So for me, that was helpful. Yeah.
Glad you said that. Yeah. Yeah. It's a good reminder of how much intention setting does matter. Sometimes the medicine goes in a completely different direction, but I think it's priming the unconscious in some ways for what you might explore,
right?
How how it's going to open up. It's that, classic set and setting.
Right, right. So that was a beautiful day.
Wow.
Energetically exhausted. Yeah. Had a beautiful dinner that you cooked.
That's right. Yeah, we had it's a Peruvian Chinese dish.
Chicken and the salad and the dessert, which was a vegan cheesecake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would no bake cheesecake, and it was a thing you came up with based on some recipes online, but you just kind of improvised. You'd never made it, and it was freaking delicious.
It was really good.
So
I'm not gonna lie.
It was so good, and went to bed, and that night, my sleep was interesting. I fell asleep, but then I awoke, and I was just conscious throughout the night. And there was some feeling of that kind of MEO feeling, like what you might call a reactivation, but it was very subtle and gentle. And it felt like this work was being done, this processing was being done. And it was energetic, it wasn't conceptual. And so I woke up kind of early and I was a little tired, but the day's plan was this, the ayahuasca analog. Now, this I was nervous about because I'd been through this thing the day before, and it's not really that common, right, to do 2 days of this kind of work. We're kind of going for the PhD masterclass for Zubin so that he could, experience it and talk about it. And that's what I asked for. It's like, let's, I don't want to have to do this work myself piecemeal, and I've had a lot of prep, and I think I'm ready to do this. And we talked so much about it, and you made me feel quite comfortable that, okay, this is okay to try. But you also gave me the permission to completely opt out of this.
And one note I want to make, just safety-wise, is the order that we did this in is incredibly, incredibly important.
Please talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if we had done the ayahuasca analog on day 1 and then the 5-MeO on day 2, that's a recipe for very serious medical crisis, possibly. And the reason is that the MAO inhibitor can be active in your system for quite a while. At the very bare minimum, it's going to be in there 24 hours. But I've read some stuff, in terms of just half-lives and things like that, that perhaps can even be active in your system for as long as a week. So what I've always heard, and talking with Ben Malcolm as well, and just in the community, that if you ever are doing anything with an MAO inhibitor, if you go to an ayahuasca ceremony or you're doing the analog or whatever, do not do any 5-MeO, or really you shouldn't want to be doing any kind of serotonergic psychedelic, just in case, for a week basically. Yeah. But if you flip the order, then it's fine, because 5-MeO-DMT is so rapidly processed. So
that's right.
Because we did 5-MeO on day 1, basically as soon as you do your last dose, within about 2 hours, it is gone without a trace from your system. Yeah. Now the energetic
are still there. I can speak to that.
Yeah, shadow may still be there, but then so then when we go into the ayahuasca analog on day 2, in terms pharmacologically, we do have a clean slate actually at that point. So just wanted to mention that. Very important,
and we mentioned it in the last one, but you cannot mention it enough.
Yeah, you can't,
because people at home, if they're trying to do this, which I do not recommend.
Yeah, it's just so easy and people confuse these compounds all the time.
Right. And you don't want serotonin syndrome. It's not good.
No.
Yeah. So that said, I was very ambivalent when I went to bed that night about the thing, because I felt energetically like I'd had this incredible experience, and I was tired because it is like a lot. And especially the rectal MEO was such a emotional and energetically challenging experience in a beautiful way, that I was like, I don't know what I would do with this other thing, and I'm a little nervous about it, and maybe not. And so I said, let's sleep on it. And you said, yeah, we don't have to do anything else. We could be totally done. And the next morning I woke up after I'd had that minimal sleep and was just like, I signed up to do this, meaning I know my intention. I want to do the work that's hard that I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. And, I've tried ayahuasca before, but not the analog ayahuasca, the natural one. And it was so uncomfortable that I was dreading that. And so, but I said, you know what, if that's what it is, that's what I need to see, then that's what I need to see. So I came in, we did the yoga and the stretching. Mm-hmm. You kind of validated the decision, reaffirmed that you don't have to do anything. And how did we administer this? You gave me the Harmaline, which is the MAO inhibitor.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that and then sat in meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And typically what you'd mentioned is this can cause some physical symptoms because it tends to do that. But I didn't feel that at all. What I felt was the still opening of the MEO-like opening. And I think I had a lot of emotion release.
You did, yeah.
No real psychoactive compound. I guess the MAOIs are somewhat psychoactive.
It can be. It's more subtle.
Yeah.
It's definitely not like a tryptamine, but people do have some effects. But
Got it.
usually the body load is what people feel the most.
Right.
It can be poof, like
a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that, but I did feel the emotional opening. And I thought, oh, how lovely. I'm going to have this really beautiful, loving, emotional opening. And then I took the DMT after that had 45 minutes ago.
Nn-dmt.
Sorry.
Just to get technical.
Nn-dmt, exactly.
I like to say that too.
It's actually important. Yeah. Because they're not the same at all.
Mm-hmm.
There's different. Yeah. So then I laid back and very quickly, actually, I started feeling this discomfort. And I started to recognize it. I was like, this feels like ayahuasca. And that was the nn-dmt component starting to kick in. And over the next 45, 48 minutes, it started feeling a lot of nausea, abdominal discomfort. And I was like, okay, I know what this is. So I wasn't frightened, but I was like, oh, it's going to be this. Okay. Maybe it'll open into something blissful and lovely. What happened was then it started really... The experience of the nn-dmt is one of this imagery and this, it's very psilocybin-like actually in this experience for me, which was new. And you were playing some music, which was very tuned into this energy. And it was just this experience of something beyond me really forcing me to surrender in a million different ways. So incredible discomfort, like just agonizing, writhing discomfort. And I say this in a way that people are going to be like, nope.
Yeah.
But hear me out. Because there's a knowing, because we've set intention, we've talked about it, that this is the work, that there's a process here that's got an intelligence that is energetic. It's not conceptual. So from the work that I've done before too, I could feel into that and go, okay, if I feel into this as abdominal pain, nausea, discomfort, this is unbearable physical suffering. But this is energy. This is energy that's okay to be here. It's trying to show me what it is. And it's in the same abdominal place that that the MEO was showing me, this like root terror, this root existential death fear and safety fear, and this clenched kind of fist that's saying, no, 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 it's right there.
Yeah.
I said, so what if I unclench? And so I would just imagine a fist in my stomach where the pain was unclenching. And the whole mental scape would shift and open, and there'd be like, oh. And then a new energetic would arise in a different location. And it would do the same thing. And I was grunting and vocalizing.
Yeah.
How was I moving at this point?
I remember there was lots of protective kind of postures, kind of closing in like this. And you were definitely, it did feel like you were putting your hands on the spots that needed the release. So you putting your hands on your chest, on your abdomen.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, there were kind of, waves of the kind of gripping. And then it seemed like maybe that was a moment of release. I would see a smile kind of your face.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we've gone
That's
gotten over that hump. And now here's the next one.
Here's the next one. And and so there were a few things that arose in this. Again, my father arose, and then the child, the inner child, and then the holding of that inner child arose. My family was my anchor, so I would see my mother and my wife and my children, and I would say, I love you, I love you, I love you, as a way to anchor into being able to bear this thing that felt very on the edge of unbearable. And then again, the energetic sense, like, okay, when this dissolves into energy, what is it? It's just energy. And so that knowing that like, this is a rewiring of this bodily trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then some really wonderful things happen. So there would be that thing that the clenching and and then the thinking of the energy and then the surrender and the release. And then the hands would go up. I remember this. And the whole body would tremor like,
yeah, you were doing some TRE type stuff.
It was TRE.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was trauma release exercise, but natural, spontaneous. The whole body from the feet all the way to the head.
Yeah, you were shaking it out. And sometimes there would be this almost snapping. Like a rubber band.
It felt like an energetic pop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And internally I would mouth, thank you, because I could feel this stored bodily memory of all this conditioning just pass through and just beautifully release. And it occurred to me, I'm like, this is the work. This is why I'm suffering here. Like, because I have to feel it again. I have to feel it in the way the child felt it, or the young man felt it, or the medical student who suffered felt it, or the resident who, was so heartbroken, that he couldn't help people because it was too much, so all of that stored, and it was just kind of passing, and it shows up as these like energetic knots. And and so there was this gratitude that this was happening, and then back into the regressed, like, oh God, like this is too much. And at some point, I think you asked me, would you like some supportive touch? And at that point, this was really beautiful. I saw you come and you put one hand here holding this right hand, and you put another hand on my shoulder, and I was in the like right lateral decubitus position and on the pillow, and I just started sucking my thumb and just kind of softly like this, and it felt like I was being held like by this very parental energy, and the child was being soothed. And it was going to be okay, but it was going to hurt, and it was okay. And that, I don't know how long that lasted, but I knew when it was done, and I was like, thank you. Yeah. It was just the most, and it was still, I'm not saying this was fun and enjoyable. I'm saying it was a deep hurt, but I was held. And that's a great guide. I'm so grateful for that.
Oh, well, yeah thank you. I am so appreciative of those moments when I can serve as that kind of symbolic parent to allow you to do that inner reparenting work. And the power of touch in these experiences is so immense. And initially, when I started to do this work, I sort of was a bit skeptical. And I think some of that had to do with my own attachment style and some of the ways that I received touch when I was a child that were not
productive,
healing and that were invasive. But when I received really healing touch, when I was guided, it just opened my eyes to, wow, because we are relational beings, and our first relationships are through touch, through physical touch, right? Before we have the words. And so, when you're in that really, really vulnerable childlike state and you're feeling unsafe and scared, to have a warm body of someone who's there. To care for you, I think it really does something very deep and shifts. And it's something, it's like, I feel like my role there is symbolic, and I'm a catalyst, as I see it, for you to take that kind of soothing into yourself. So that whatever part of you is energetically feeling unsafe in your day-to-day life has been felt, expressed, and had its needs met, so that you don't have to operate from that place of fear anymore.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Yeah, it was beautiful. And then back into the breach and more. And this lasted quite a while. It was a longer experience. I forget how long it lasted, the whole. Yeah,
it was. I mean, we gave you the DMT around nn-dmt, around 9 a.m. There you go, in the morning. And I mean, we were wrapping up around noon.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
But you were still having, and part of that was the blood sugar thing.
That's right. So when I was feeling like I was coming down and starting to process with you and recovering, you said, I had a little coconut water, which was the first, actual food I'd had, or any calories. And we sat outside, and, I felt, like I said, I'm still really having a kind of trippy experience. Like there's clearly still the medicine is doing its thing. The physical discomfort's gone, but I can tell that there's that psilocybin-like quality that's still here.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, you should just eat something. And I was like, I don't think I can because I still feel a little nauseous. I was scared to do it. And you're like, well, okay. And then it kept going, and we were going to take a nap, take that break and a nap. And then I couldn't sleep. So I was like, you know what? I think you're right. I went and had some ginger, some crystallized ginger, and then started eating a few other things. And very rapidly, I felt much more clear.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens.
Yeah,
just
it's probably a blood sugar thing.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really magic.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were pretty I was pretty physiologically done at that point. And so what we decided was, okay, we'll regroup after dinner, we'll decide. And we decided, let's not do the next thing maybe at all, or if we do it, we'll do it in the morning of our integration day because it's short acting, the salvia.
Mm-hmm.
And so tried to sleep that evening, not great sleep, but here's what was interesting here. None of that sense from the previous night of like integration work being done, none of the sense of that, anything had been done. It felt very flat, almost like there was really nothing happening except for insomnia. That's how it felt. And I think I might have just been, well, who knows what it is, but it felt like, okay. That was a very painful experience that I'm very grateful for, but maybe it just exhausted me a bit. And now I just need to just process and sit in bed. And so it was fine. I got up in the morning. I felt pretty good, actually. Had coffee and we met, and then it was a decision of, okay, so do we do the next medicine, which is Salvia Divinorum. Mm-hmm. Now, this is something that we've talked about on the other show. It is legal in many states. Yep. Most states, maybe.
I believe so. Yeah. In Oregon, where I live, it is. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And it has this big stigma, which we talked about on the other show, which is, there's some stuff in the press that's kind of like moral panic around it because kids are doing it, buying it at smoke shops and having these experiences, and they have no setting context guidance. Yeah. They're just looking to get high. And but your experience with it was very, very different in a way that actually nobody really I've seen talks about. And that's why this is probably the most important part of the show, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first started working with psychedelics back around 2018 and early 2019, I kind of had this desire to just explore whatever I could because I was just really curious. And already I had that spiritual intention with non-duality, but I also had a kind of dilettante interest of let's try this, let's try that. And so Salvia was accessible because it's legal. And so I tried it, and I had a very powerful experience. I think I might have shared in the last show that it was the first time that I ever had what they call a cessation, which people sometimes make a big deal of that, and maybe it's a big deal, maybe it's not. I don't know, but it sometimes for people marks an energetic shift in terms of really recognizing you could say non-duality, the kind of nature of consciousness, nature of mind. And that was true for me and that medicine, which is interesting. And so it really kind of opened my eyes to, something's going on here because this medicine is so stigmatized. And yet here it's actually been one of the most powerful openers. And I had tried 5-MeO and mushrooms and other things at that point, but nothing had really quite made that, global kind of shift where I was opening my eyes and suddenly it became clear, of course, everything is consciousness. It's all connected. That was so clear. And so, I think it all just comes down to set and setting. I mean, like any medicine. I think there's such a rich indigenous tradition around this that has been erased by the moral panic, like we talked about. But I've found that, and even I'll say within psychedelic circles, it's kind of discounted or dismissed. Even people I know well who work with other medicines, it's kind of like, I tell them I'm starting to work with salvia again. They're saying, salvia? Why would you do that? I tried that when I was 16 and it just, I had a horrible experience. But Yeah, there are a few folks, and I want to mention Christopher Solomon, who's a colleague of mine, who has a salvia farm and cultivates it, and has a beautiful relationship with the medicine, and does very amazing healing work. And I'll say I don't feel like there is a lot of discourse and discussion about, in general, using salvia for spiritual reasons. It's specifically using salvia for this kind of non-dual opening work. People do talk about 5-MeO all the time in the kind of non-dual context. Salvia, say very rarely.
That's right.
But as I'll share, it's a very powerful tool.
Yeah. So here, perfect. That's a perfect setup. Yeah. So, I didn't know what this was, and I thought, I don't know, my nervous system's been through a lot. This probably is just not going to be, I don't know what it is. But I trusted you that your experience at least is, it gives it an option to be something very powerful. So, so we did we did some yoga, some breath work in the morning to prepare, which we'd done the previous days, but a little bit different flavor. And then we sat in a silent meditation, but with eyes open, and you guided me. We just went into that space of non-duality, really, of just this. And that was a beautiful way to start. So then sat down, and this is a more, we did it through a little bubbler, like you would smoke through.
Can I mention the sign that I made? Because I think that's an important component.
So I was going to say it right before we launched. Because this was really something. Because I walked in and I said, we'll say it now. So I walk in and I see on the glass of the window, the word "this" with an exclamation point in painter's tape, blue painter's tape. And I'm like, oh, how adorable. How non-dual. This, of course. It's just this. But you said, no, there's a reason I'm putting that there. And I was like, okay, I trust you. I don't know what this could be. It seems a little, to be honest, I was like, this is a little cheesy, like, writing this. Like, I was like,
I love that you had that reaction.
I don't know.
And you're just humoring me.
No, well, I was like, I trust you. But like in this state, just having this poor sleep, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's really adorable, but like, I don't know. Is this like going to work for anything? Oh my God. Okay, so we sit down with the bubbler, you dose the thing out, we try the low dose. And, you light it, I inhale for a certain amount. It's a protocol. I exhale and I sit. I'm sitting upright on my meditation cushion, and I'm noticing nothing. And then this kind of feeling of pressure in the face in an orthogonal way, like thum, 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 thum. And then I notice the entire environment is doing that a little. Thum, thum, thum. This lateral slice of a pressure wave. Very hard to describe, but very obvious. Like, oh. And I've never felt anything like it. And it was unique and interesting. But honestly, at this point, my mind was saying, this is like a little, no wonder they sell this in smoke shops. Like some stoner, I think I might have said that. Some stoner's probably going, bro, this is so trippy. Do you feel this? And I had this kind of giggle reaction, like, okay. And it was very low dose. And you're like, okay. So that resolved in just minutes. Then I was sitting there and you're like, okay, maybe we'll go to this next higher dose. And you lit it, I inhaled it. And I'll tell you now, my memory stopped. I don't know what happened next. And I don't know how long there was a disappearance. But the next thing I knew, I noticed that the entire sense realm was doing that orthogonal thing, but the whole visual field was going in hyperspace. It was as if I was in a washing machine and the entire reality was on spin cycle. And I was the agitator in the center, and it was just going. And I could hear this rush like of water spinning around. And that's when I realized, I don't know how long I hadn't realized it, I just inhaled a salvia. And this is what's happening. And then I look over and I see you, and you're looking at me like this, and you point at the window where the word "this" exclamation point, and it's going, and it goes, and I see this, and this is going, and you're looking at me like this.
Yeah, I was actually tapping the glass
tapping
too.
The glass,
I was like
tapping the glass, and I suddenly got it. Like I was like, oh, she's trying to pull, she mentioned you could be launched into hyperspace, into alien dimensions.
Oh,
but the whole point is kind of turn around and notice that it's this.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were like, this. And I was like, oh, this. And then lost again, like lost, obliterated. And just like gone. The zook, it's back. And there you are. This. And I was like, I can't stay here. I'm trying, and gone. And then it started, and I think I started vocalizing saying, holy fuck.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Like in those moments of clarity where the spin cycle slowed,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was speed again. And I was absolutely obliterated. There was no me. There was just the entire environment doing this dance of chaotic energy. It's so indescribable. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. I was shocked and surprised, very disoriented because I wasn't expecting, you can't put this in words, so you can't be prepared for it. So whatever you say about hyperspace and all that, it's like, no, it doesn't mean anything. When you experience it, it's like, and it was disconcerting. I was like, what? And so as it started to start to slow down, it wasn't that long. Of course, it was timeless. So there was a period where I was like, I'm just gone. I'm gone forever.
It's very short. I mean, the whole active phase, it felt like, I think it was about 5 to 10 minutes. The whole thing. Yeah.
So it felt timeless.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't time. And then I could start to see the coming back of time as it slowed down. And then I started to, okay, it's clearing, and I could feel it. And I had this look on my face, like, and I think
Deer in the headlights.
Deer in the headlights, like, what the fuck just happened? And there was this feeling of just like absolute surprise, a little bit of fear, and it's this strange feeling of like, wherever I went, I don't want to go there again because I'm out of control. There's no me, and the universe is gone. Mm-hmm. It's gone in a way that there was almost like a kind of grief, like, no, this is the universe, not that. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, like this is the universe. And there was this, I was almost looking at you like with a pleading eyes, like, okay, I'm not doing any more of that because I don't ever want to lose this. And so we were talking, and you were looking at me like, oh, okay, yeah, that's your experience. Yeah. Sometimes it can, and maybe a lower dose, but you don't have to do that. And I was like, nope. And I'm not doing any of that again. And then something abso-fucking-lutely remarkable happened. And I think I credit you with this because if I didn't have this, first of all, if I didn't have the training that I have and the work that I've done, and you to kind of set this possibility that this is a non-dual teacher. Mm-hmm. This is the neuroscientist pointing to you. I started to look around with gratitude at like, okay, I'm here. I don't have to go back there. Because you're like, yeah, you don't have to do anything. And I look around and I'm like, it's just this. And suddenly the window made perfect sense. It's this. And by going into hyperspace, somehow this medicine felt like it showed me. It's like when you come back from a harrowing journey, you kiss the ground.
Right.
I was kissing reality because it was perfect as it is. Mm-hmm. And you could see when it goes that's possible. That's another experience. And your mind is making it all.
Yeah.
Because it's all here. And then when it comes back, it's still being made. But like it was so present, so perfect. No bells and whistles, no spiritual bullshit, none of the 5 MEO like beauty and gratitude. It was just perfection. This with no spiritual bells and whistles. And as that settled, it settled more and more. And then I was like, can we go outside? And we're walking and you're looking at me like, yeah. And I go outside and I'm like, it's just this. Yes. The lesson of the MEO, the full release, told me this, but in a different way.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing.
A very different way.
Yeah.
This was much more matter of fact, just, hey, dummy, this.
Yeah, it's very ordinary, very simple. And it doesn't seem to care what the quality of the experience is. It's just the experience is what's happening. Yeah.
That's right. It doesn't matter if it's a dog turd
Yeah.
or, a beautiful sunset. It's just what's happening
Yeah.
and it's fine.
And not even the content, but like how you're experiencing it. Because we can put all these spiritual lenses of, I'm looking at the dog turd, but I'm looking at it as a manifestation of consciousness and the self. I'm doing the headless way. Like all these things, like it could be that, or it could be just dualistic or whatever, but it's just, you're not controlling that. It's just what's happening.
That's right.
So there's an ordinary just kind of choicelessness of this moment. And yeah, and it's perfection. And it's almost more of the etymological perfection of it being like, as I remember from my old Latin back in the day, like it means like completed. Like it's just the way it is.
It's the whole.
It doesn't necessarily have any emotional quality of like, ooh, it's so like beatifically perfect. It's just the isness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't dancing around the couch like I was with MEO.
Yeah.
We were sitting out there and I'm like, the emotion tone was absolutely neutral. No matter what I looked at. It's just what's happening. And if an emotion arises, that's just what's happening.
Yeah.
It was so remarkable.
Which sounds a little bit, as you said, it sounds a little bypassy. Like you don't care about the person.
But it's not.
But because it's just whatever is happening, you can't control it.
Because care arose. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Care arose, but it wasn't held in a way. It wasn't mine. It was just care is arising.
Yeah.
You know what? I have to say this. This is impossible to talk about. But it's so clear. And then I was like, oh, Mira, this is what you were pointing at.
Yeah. And I was so happy because it's this very specific thing. And this is the essence of what I am trying to talk about with this unjourneying.
Yes. It felt like an unjourney.
Which is, it's such a finesse and it's such a bizarre and unusual move and pivot within the psychedelic space that I think a lot of folks don't do. And I never did it either. It's just by serendipity, as I mentioned in the previous episode. I had this weird thing with the lion's mane that kind of forced me into that position.
Right.
And for those of you who may not have seen the previous episode, when I'm talking about this unjourneying, what I'm talking about is it's almost like a 2-part process. It's almost like a big kind of arc through working with psychedelics. Or first, when you start, you are journeying. What I mean by that is, of course, there's all this emotional stuff that's happening, and you may feel like you are traveling. You may feel like you are going elsewhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's inevitable. I think it has to happen. You have to journey back into your childhood.
It's the hero's journey.
You have to, maybe you do need to, meet aliens, and those entities have some kind of intrapsychic significance or whatever is going on. But for me, at least, what I've found is that you if you want to keep journeying, you can keep doing that, but it may end up actually being a kind of bypass.
Yeah.
Because then you're doing it for the experience, for the light show, et cetera.
And you're avoiding this.
Yeah. And at some point in time, and this is what I call the unjourneying, and I think it happens when people have sort of released a lot of those, you talk about those energetic points of clenching. When a lot of that stuff is released and you've done the inner child work, then you can come back to these medicines and there's more of a clarity, a clearing out that's happening. And you have the capacity and the bandwidth to just rest in what's happening. And then you can start doing what I call unjourneying, which are using these medicines, and the intention is to use them meditatively to be here. And it's really interesting seeing how you really did amazing work all along that spectrum, because, it seems like, especially in the rectal and the nn-dmt, the ayahuasca analog, you were doing a lot of deep, important inner child journeying work. And then what's really cool is that with the 5-MeO, and I think this is actually a very unique and profound experience that you had, is you didn't really have the classic full release light show that people usually have, where they come out saying, oh my God, everything just exploded into pure fractal energy, which is what I had back in the day. I definitely got attached to that experience early on. There's an old video of me on the internet, sort of waxing poetic about it. Yeah, and it's it's a thing, but it's ultimately just an experience. And what the insight you had, which is really cool, is that you had that unjourneying pivot, like almost in the middle of that, what could have been that light show full release. It sounds like you had some momentary cessation or something, and then you came back to this. Yeah. And then again, basically a similar thing kind of happened with the Salvia. Yeah.
And I have to say this, I credit that to the inception effect of you setting the stage for these possibilities, because you don't hear people talk about this as much. It's always about the journey.
Right.
It's not about the unjourney back to this. And so that was important. And I have to say one other thing, I have to credit another person who incepted me this that I only remembered after the fact.
Yeah.
So for the MEO, I told my friend Ishwar, who has been on the show, he's known to many in the non-dual community. And I said, I'm doing these things. And he's like, of course, he loves to speak with me. We both do our Indian accents because we're both of Indian ancestry. And he's like, oh, buddy. He's like, remember this, though. When you do the MEO, make sure to turn around. Remember to turn around. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you'll know what I mean. You'll be drawn in a direction. It'll try to pull you in a place. And if you remember to pivot back to this, that's just all you need to know. And I didn't really think about that. I hadn't set that intention going in. And that's what happened. There was a natural like, nope, no, that was it. Yeah.
And it's so cool because in some ways, I love moments like this because it's an interesting anomaly. And what I see is a certain model of, okay, first you have the journey and then you have the light show. And then when you get used to that, but you're raising the possibility that maybe, if somebody has perhaps already done a lot of preparatory work and they have that particular intention, maybe that pivot to Unjourneying can happen even in the very first kind of full release dose moment. So that's just really interesting.
Well, I have to be honest, because the reason I was drawn to you, Mira, and invited you to be on the show was that the way you spoke about Unjourneying resonated so much, because I had until that point considered psychedelics a bypass mechanism. And I know a lot of people who are regular psychedelic users, and I feel like they're just avoiding, and they're seeking the next experience. And it's not giving them new insights in that sense. And it felt like, this is not okay. This is not it. And so when I met you, I thought, now she really understands, like, she's been through the seeking, she's done the journeying, and now she sees this. And I was like, that is so intriguing to me, because I wasn't really intending to do MEO. The things I'd heard about it, I was like, I don't really need that, or another ayahuasca journey. And Salvia, I didn't even know what that was. And yet here we are at the end, of that experience. And it's just insane how the synchronicity came together.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. This has been I just feel so much gratitude.
I'm so grateful
to you for I mean, I literally just sent you an email.
Yeah.
Just proposing and just being on the show. That was all.
Yeah. You didn't propose any of this stuff. You were just like, I'll be on the show. And then when I talked to you, I was like, okay, here's a thought. and it's just been, and there was so much fear, Mira. Like, I was scared of this. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think.
Yeah, healthy and normal.
Yeah, healthy and normal, yeah.
And justified, I think, yeah. I mean, it's like you really want to do your homework before you do these medicines.
Yes, and that's what and
I help you do that.
That's
I have lots of checklists to make sure it's safe.
You're extremely scientific. You're very meticulous person, and that comes through and it transmits. And so there's a trust that develops. So yeah, I'm just so grateful. And in reflecting on the whole process, looking back on it, it is one seamless whole. Now, you could say, well, you don't need to do all these things. Of course you don't. You don't need to do each of these things. Sure, of course you don't. But there's something about the whole process here that brought it back to the Unjourney. Like, if you'd done the Salvia in the beginning, it would have made no sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have had all this work. So it just would have been chaos. Yeah. And I would have been like, I'm not doing that again. And I wouldn't have had the realization. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think there's something, I mean, and this is just based on my experience, that there was something about working with the medicines for me in this sequence that opened them up in this way to lead to this kind of coming full circle just to right here, right now. And and that's why this formulation I have, and maybe, other people experience it different ways, but this idea of the 5-MeO is very expansive. It's very releasing. And then the nn-dmt can do that as well, but there's also this way, and you experience this a little bit towards the end, when we're just meditating together.
Yes, that's right. The end of it.
Yeah, it can feel like this kind of glue that just keeps you in this.
Yes.
And it's a slippery medicine too. And this is where you see how intention and set and setting are so important, because of course we know there's lots of folks out there who use nn-dmt to converse with the machine elves and go down these realms. And I've seen too within ayahuasca circles, this is kind of what you were talking about. Like it's such a it's a medicine that so amplifies your ability to form patterns and stories. And so you can certainly do like an ayahuasca journey and then come with this huge bucket of very complex stories that you keep weaving more and more and more complex. Then you do it again. And it's almost like this vicious cycle.
That's
right.
You're
going farther and farther down into these archetypal kind of stories. And I feel like if you just keep doing it, you'll get to some truth. But what you see is it's just, your mind is just such an incredible
story maker.
Yeah, story maker. But what I found, I saw that, and then I found for me that if I really actively meditate with it, then it just brings you into this radiant feeling, which is very similar to that Dzogchen.
That's right.
This, and then the sign thing is kind of funny, and I almost surprised myself because it does seem cheesy to me as well, but I just can't deny that this came out of my own direct experience, because when I started working with Salvia again after some years of breaking, I started to do this process, meditating with it, and then I had some moments similar to you where it's difficult to dose with the leaves, and I'm actually working on some more precise dosing protocols. But sometimes it can sweep you out, and you can start to feel like I'm going into another dimension.
That's where I was.
Yeah, or I'm going into a different universe, and then what I found is that, especially during the kind of coming down phase, I personally had this experience of feeling this incredible salience of just the thisness of this moment, and in this almost just emphatic way. That's where the exclamation point, and this phrase came into my mind: the most important thing happening in the universe is what's happening right now. And that came to me almost like a message. And so when I started, I actually have at home just this little kind of triangle of cardboard that I just wrote that on, and when I journey with it, I put it UnJourney in front of me. And so when the sweep to those other realms comes on, it's like an anchor. It brings me back. And so when I knew we were going to do this, I thought, I want you to have that anchor, but maybe something more simple, just the word. But even there's something about the exclamation point.
Oh, no,
it does something to your brain that just reminds you, it
had to have the exclamation point.
Yeah,
I'll
right?
tell you, it has to have it. Okay, now that this is really integrating, it's integrating more and more. And by the way, this is still my experience. Like this is still my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a profound medicine in that sense. I was so in the other dimension that there was no way I was coming back if there hadn't been that anchor. And that anchor kept pulling me back and pulling me back and pulling me back. And I think that was enough to show me the contrast between hyperspace nothingness and this.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see this with an exclamation point vibrating,
right,
trying to dissolve, but just being like, nope, and then it did something to me. Where then when I came back and and it started settling, it was like, it was exactly that, the emphatic, like this. Yeah. Really freaking crazy. Surprising beyond surprising, and simple beyond explanation.
Yeah. And this is something that we were just kind of, jamming about, just talking about as you were integrating, is that perhaps there is some kind of difference between, you might say, like the genre or even flavor of awakening that is often talked about in non-dual or perhaps like Dzogchen type contexts, which has oftentimes this air of a kind of beatific quality. To things.
Radiance.
Which is certainly it's a real thing. It's something you can train yourself to do.
Yep.
And it seems to me, I think you would agree that the tryptamines seem very good at enhancing that. Like if you're, especially with nn-dmt, as you're, maybe at lighter doses, as you look around at everything, there can be a glowy, just precious kind of quality to things. And then what's so fascinating, and we are in agreement about this, is that Salvia doesn't seem to really bother with that. It seems to be somehow orthogonal, where it's like, maybe something is showing up beatifically, maybe it's not. Maybe you're having a moment that feels like a rich non-dual moment. Maybe you're in your head, whatever. It's just like you can't control that. So instead of spiritual practice being about trying to have a certain experience over others, it's almost like the very idea of practice kind of deconstructs. Because it's like, I can't control my experience at all. Even the thought I'm having, or the words coming out of my mouth right now, whether it's just all happening on its own. It's like that's how it feels. And so it's just, yeah.
So I'm just going to say
Yeah.
that is the deepest teaching. That's it.
Mhm.
It's not a teaching.
Yeah.
It's just the truth.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's exact what you just said. That's it.
Yeah. Sensations are doing what they're doing.
What they're doing. You don't control it.
Yeah.
There's no preferred thing. I mean, you can a preference can show up.
And how's that going to show up? It's going to show up as sounds or mental images in the mind.
That's right.
It's going to show up as body sensations. Maybe you're at a restaurant and you're visualizing, oh, I'm rating this menu item, and then I'm visualizing the steak, and then I'm feeling something in my mouth, the salivation. Right. And all that's happening, do, sensation. And there's not like, at least I can't find a controller, a doer.
And I can't find actual a will that is doing that.
Yeah.
Beyond what this is all orchestrated by nothing. You can't talk about it, but that's it. And so, okay, to tie this in all together, the unjourneying that you spoke of before I did this with you was a pull for me, and I kind of got it in a sense, but now I really get it. And I think that it's so important because I think psychedelics now becoming mainstream and all that, it's wonderful, but they can just be another way we chase something that we will never catch, which is something that doesn't exist, which is something better or other than what is.
Yeah.
And so when you unjourney, you take all of that, you do the journey, you crush yourself through that in a way, and then you come back and realize, and that's the cosmic joke, is like, it's always been just this, and it's okay. It's enough. It's more than enough. It can't be less or more than enough. It's just what it is. Yeah. And I'm so grateful.
I'm grateful too.
So I think I can tell my audience, like I don't know if I'll ever release this, but we'll see. If I release it, it shows I have actual courage and also total foolishness. But your website, UnJourneying, is it unjourney.com?
It's UnJourneying.
UnJourneying,
yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the links.
I chose it that way so it's a process.
Yes.
It's not just a thing.
I agree.
It's not a noun, it's iterative. Yeah.
It's like this, exclamation point.
Yeah. Suffixes matter, yeah.
They do. So that is the way they can reach you. If they want to work with you, maybe other people want to consult with you, whatever it is that you are willing and able to do is a gift to this realm. So
thanks.
I'm so grateful. Thank you for all your time and wisdom and love and connection, because we talked about that. It's really connection.
Yeah.
And getting to know you has been just a absolute joy.
Oh, thanks.
And you've taught me other stuff that is so priceless that we talked about in our other show. So I'm deeply appreciative.
Thank you. Well, I feel the same way. And thank you for taking a risk, being bold and just responding to my email and going with your gut. Because I think it would have been so easy to just be like, another non-dual person, or another podcast pitch. Like,
that's usually what I do.
Yeah, but something in you, but I'm going to take a risk on this person. I feel like I've been really amazed at your open-heartedness and willingness, and we've had some just really rich conversations, and your willingness to take feedback and just go to some difficult places. I feel so close to you, and I wanted to share this because I think it's really meaningful to me that I discovered after a couple of days of spending time with you that you reminded me very much so of this Zen master that I was studying under in Korea. And so I have this strong kind of positive transference towards you. And
that's an honor.
Yeah. And this has honestly been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
I have to say it's definitely like life-changing and wonderful and affirming and heart-opening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hope that the people who watch get even the subtlest flavor of that, because it's just a gift that you're giving, and we'll keep giving. So thank you, Mira Funk, and thank you for watching this. And this is where I get to do the fun YouTube stuff. Smash that like button. Leave a comment about your own psychedelic journeys in the comments. Share, and make sure to turn on that little notification bell, because in the end, it's this with an exclamation point. At some point I might try those just to mix it up. Yeah. All right, guys, we're out. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you. Mhm.